Stream, damn you. I'm just seeing if it streams on YouTube, so I'm doing the multi-stream thing. So bear with me for a second. Twitch, I think Twitch is fantastic. It's probably working like a charm. See, look at Twitch. Brilliant. Perfect. Hurry up. Right, it's working. Let me just change the thumbnail. See, if I had a full team, it's going to happen one day. As a Muslim say, inshallah. It'll happen very soon. Why is this not working on Twitch? It's not disappearing. Accept. Alright, it's working now. It's all streaming. Alright. Let's do this. Alright, so... yeah, so I'm doing my reading stream. I'll do the gaming stream later. So I'm doing my reading stream right now. I'm looking at Prisoners of Geography. So I've read the introduction. I'm looking at chapter 1. We're looking at Russia. This is to entice my academic side, because I'm a doctor, aren't I? A doctor of theology. So what I normally do, I look at the chapter, read through the thing, but then I'm also reviewing, comparing with maps, because what Tim Marshall does, he uses maps to describe geopolitics today. So the first chapter I'm looking at is Russia. First chapter I'm looking at is Russia. So I've got 3 types of maps here. One is the topographical map, where you can see all the mountain ranges. Like here, over here, look at that. Look at that big beastie mountain between India and China. Then you got the Google map. And then you got the marine map. So you can see all the shipping routes. Because it's all about shipping, isn't it, at the end of the day? We'll see the Strait of Hormuz. That's kind of in the news today, isn't it? Look. So you got Hormuz here. It's all blocked off at the moment, but it's all coming through here. So all the oil comes through there. Then you got all these other straits there. So let's get on with this. Start with Russia. Chapter 1, Russia. Vast. Adjective. Vaster. Vastus. Of very great area or extent. Immense. All right. So that's Russia. That's how big it is. That's what she said. Okay. Let's start. Russia is vast. It is vastus. Immense. It is 6 million square miles vast. 11 time zones vast. It is the largest country in the world. It's 11 time zones. Okay. Its forests, lakes, rivers, frozen tundras, steeps, taigras, and mountains are all vast. This size has long seeped into our collective consciousness. Wherever we are, there is Russia. Perhaps to our east or west, to our north or south, but there is the Russian bear. What do they call it, the Russian bear? Let's see that. Russian bear. Hang on a sec. Russian bear. Why do they call it that? Oh, never mind that. It's talking about the Russian bear. Never mind. It's that's kind of sidetracking, is it? It is no coincidence that the bear is a symbol of this immense nation. There it sits, sometimes hibernating, sometimes growling, majestic, but ferocious. Bear is a Russian word, but the Russians are also very wary to call this animal by its names, fearful of conjuring up its darker side. They call it medved, the one who likes honey. Hang on, let me check. Oh yeah. What does medved mean in Russian? Okay. Medved literally means bear. Interesting, the word comes from the old Slavic root meaning honey eater rather than the animal itself. So it's like calling a bear the one who eats honey. This is because early Slavic peoples avoided saying their original name directly. Animals' original names directly, which they considered unlucky. I've got a nephew named Slavic, so that's another story. Anyway, let's go up. At least 120,000 of these medveds live in the country, which bestrides Europe and Asia. Hang on. So go here. It's got Europe here. It's down that bit. Europe and Asia, all that. Look at this big bastard, isn't it? It's right there. Okay. To the west of the Ural Mountains is European Russia. Right, this is where it's quite interesting. Yeah, where you say, where's the Ural Mountains? The Ural Mountains, it'll highlight here. So you go Ural Mountains. You can't read this book without looking at a map. You can't read this book without looking at a map, because I've tried it and I just get lost. So this is the whole point of doing this. Mountains. Okay. So you go here. Oh, for flip's sake. All right. So these are the Ural Mountains. All that red dotted line here. You can see it here as well. This is the topographical map. So you have this line over here. That's in Russia. So you got Russia, this side over here. European Russia's all here. That bit. And Asian Russia, where there's nothing. I'm not assuming. Okay, I'm assuming that. There's stuff here. You can see all these mountain ranges here, yeah. But you got the Euro-Russian here, then you got the Asian Russia here, okay? Right. To the east is Siberia, stretching all the way to the Bering Sea and the Pacific Ocean. All right, so where's the Bering Sea? So there's a Bering Sea. So this is this side of Russia. There's a Bering Sea and the Pacific Ocean. Pacific Ocean, Pacific Ocean, okay. Bering Sea. There. Pacific Ocean. Even in the 21st century, to cross it by train takes 6 days. So go from here to here, takes 6 days. Is that what it's saying? Yeah, okay. Russia's leaders must look across these distances and differences and formulate policy. Okay, bring this up accordingly. For several centuries now, they've looked in all directions, but concentrated mostly westwards. So all Russians care about is this. Okay? So when writers seek to get to the heart of the bear, they often use Winston Churchill's famous observation of Russia, made in 1939. It is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. But if you go on to complete the sentence, which ends, but perhaps there is a key. That's my Winston Churchill. What are you all learning? Oh, do you want me to show off here? I got 9 degrees. I got 4 degrees, and I got like 5, 6 postgraduate diplomas. So I did my first degree in maths from like a Russell Group, King's College London. So it's like an Ivy League, yeah. So I did my maths degree, and then I kind of switched, and then I studied like theology. I studied with the Catholics, and then I did my PhD. So I did my PhD in theology and philosophy. So that's my main thing. So I teach like comparative religion, and let me just say, yeah, I'm a specialist in Islamic law, yeah. I don't look it, but I know my shit, apparently. I'm like one of the specialists. But the thing that I've come to realize, in order to navigate this world, you've got to understand geopolitics. So every time when they talk about Gaza, they talk about Iran, it's like I kind of get lost. But I say that I need to start reading geopolitics. So this is why I started reading this. And Tim Marshall is sort of like a standard textbook that they say to get a good grips of geopolitics. And I like this idea that in order to understand the power plays of the world, geopolitics, you've got to understand the geography. And it kind of makes sense right now. I mean, you look at Russia here, yeah? You got Russia, you got the big Ural Mountains. I'm going to say Ural Mountains. You got the Ural Mountains in the middle, right? So everything west of it kind of like is dealing with stuff in Ukraine. And this is he's going to cover Ukraine, what's going to go on there in a minute. But this is written in like 2015, so it kind of predates that. But even then, you can see it goes all the way back there, over 10 years ago. Okay, what was it? But perhaps there's a key. That key is Russian national interest. 7 years later, he used that key to unlock his version of the answer to the riddle, asserting, "I'm convinced that there is nothing they admire so much as strength. And there is nothing for which," that's my Winston Churchill's kind of buggered off here. "There is nothing for which they have less respect than for weakness, especially military weakness." Okay. He could have been talking about the current Russian leadership, which, despite now being wrapped in a cloak of democracy, remains authoritarian in its nature, with national interest still at its core. So, hang on a second. Let me find out who Russian presidents and Russian... Is it Prime Minister or leadership? President. Okay. Let me see the list. President of Russia. That started recently. Hang on. Do they have like dates of it? Who was... Oh, because I want to see who was a... I hate freaking Wikipedia. It's freaking... Why is it white? Can't stand it. Not white. White. I'm going to say dark. Oh, that's it better. All right. Who would like the Russian leadership? So it's just list of presidents of Russia. So it's just a recent phenomenon. So it was probably a prime ministers of Russia after what's his name? Stalin. Prime minister. Well, Churchill was dealing with Stalin. What am I talking about? Of Russia. Oh, fuck, flip's sake, man. What am I doing? So what what is this? These are... Is it after what's called the fall of the Berlin Wall? That's where they started voting in presidents and prime ministers. All right, anyway. I'm kind of procrastinating now. Let me go back here. Okay. When Vladimir Putin isn't thinking about God and the mountains, he's thinking about pizza. In particular, the shape of a slice of pizza, a wedge. He's going to clarify why is that the case. The thin end of the wedge is called Poland. Okay. So you got Poland here. And that... from the Ural Mountains. It looks like a pizza there. Okay. Here, the vast North European plain stretching from France to the Urals. So it's all that, which extend 1,000 miles south to north, forming a natural boundary between Europe and Asia, is only 300 miles wide. Okay, so that bit's only 300 miles. Well, that's not 300 miles wide. It's got to be more than that. It runs from the Baltic Sea in the north to the Carpathian Mountains in the south. Let me just double check. The Baltic Sea is here. That's the Baltic Sea. And the Carpathian Mountains, where's that? Let me just check. Hang on a second. Where's the... Okay, there. So it goes from here to here. From that to that. Okay. The North European plain encompasses all of western and northern France, Belgium, Netherlands, northern Germany, and nearly all of Poland. So it's just basically all this crap over here. All this crap. All that stuff over here. From a Russian perspective, this is a double-edged sword. Poland represents a relatively narrow corridor into which Russia could drive its armed forces if necessary, and thus prevent an enemy from advancing towards Moscow. But from this point, the wedge begins to broaden. By the time you get to Russia's border, it's over 2,000 miles wide, and is flat all the way to Moscow and beyond. Right, where's Moscow? Moscow's here. Moscow. here. So this is flat, relatively flat. All that green stuff is flat as an iron board, flat as Texas, flat as something. I can't think of any other analogies. Okay. Where have I got to? Even with a large army, you would be hard-pressed to defend in strength along this line. However, Russia has never been conquered from this direction, partially due to its strategic depth. By the time an army approaches Moscow, it already has unsustainably long supply lines, a mistake that Napoleon made in 1812 and that Hitler repeated in 1941. Well, we know about 1941. I know about him. Napoleon tried to go into Russia. Hang on, Napoleon, Russia. French invasion of Russia. Let's go in here. Let's just read the first bit. Wikipedia is a crap source, but it's kind of like the bread and butter. It kind of like at least gets a conversation starting. The French invasion of Russia, also known as the Russian Campaign, the Second Polish War, and in Russia as the Patriotic War of 1812, was initiated by Napoleon with the aim of forcing the Russian Empire to comply with the continental blockade of the United Kingdom. So why was a French Napoleon helping UK? Widely studied, Napoleon's incursion into Russia remains a focal point in military history, recognized as among the most devastating military endeavor to ever unfold. In the span of less than 6 months, the campaign claimed the lives of around 1 million soldiers and civilians. And that's got nothing to do with religion. Everyone says that religion is the cause of all wars, but that's another topic altogether. Anyway, likewise, in the Russian Far East, it is geography that protects Russia. Okay. Let's go here, the Far East. This is going to get interesting for me. It is difficult to move an army from Asia up into Asian Russia. There's not much to attack except for snow, and you could only get as far as the Urals. You would then end up holding a massive piece of territory in difficult conditions, along supply lines, and the ever-present risk of a counterattack. I need to YouTube this, but let me YouTube this. Hang on a sec, I'm not signing into shite. I'm going to accept this. Asian Russia snow. Look at that. Have you seen this where they kind of like throwing hot water and it turns into steam? These guys are like that. Look at that.
Hi guys, this is Novosibirsk and this is...
Go here. In Siberia. That's so cool. I like that. Anyway, let's get on with this. Okay, where I read up to. Okay, let me just start this again. Likewise, in the Russian Far East, it is a geography that protects Russia. It is difficult to move an army from Asia up into Asian Russia. There's not much to attack except for snow, and you could only get as far as the Urals. You would then end up holding a massive piece of territory in difficult conditions with a long supply line and the ever-present risk of a counterattack. You might think that no one is intent on invading Russia, but that is not how the Russians see it, and with good reasons. In the past, right, if you're looking for me to game, I'm going to be gaming, but this is my academic side, so I kind of do both videos. All right. In the past 500 years, they have been invaded several times from the west. The Poles came across the North European plain in 1605. Why I keep going mixing my numbers up? Followed by the Swedes under Charles VII in 1708. The French under Napoleon in 1812 and the Germans twice in both world wars, in 1940 and 1941. Looking at it another way, you could count from Napoleon's invasion of 1812, but this time includes the Crimea War of 1853 to 1856 and the two world wars up to 1945. Then the Russians were fighting on average in and around the North European plain once every 33 years. Okay. So from 1945 onwards, they've been fighting for this bit every 33 years up to Ukraine, I guess. At the end of the Second World War in 1945, the Russians occupied the territory conquered from Germany in Central and Eastern Europe. So that's where the Berlin Wall was made, wasn't it? So let's go to the Berlin Wall. I go here. Berlin Wall. So anything east of the Berlin Wall, pretty much owned by Russia. I'm going to go Berlin Wall on YouTube, Google it. So all that. What the what's that? Who's that? I don't know who that is. This is the whole reason why I'm reading the book. Okay, so go here, Berlin Wall, they were knocking it down. Okay. Some of which then became part of the USSR, the United Soviet Socialist Republic, as it increasingly began to resemble the old Russian Empire. In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Yeah, well, graffiti, yeah. Graffiti. What happened to that guy? What's he called? Who's that artist? I forgot the guy's name who got recently... What's the guy called? Banksy. He got... Yeah, he got recently outed, didn't he? They found out who he was. Banksy images. Banksy. Anyway, I'm procrastinating. I'm kind of deviating again, procrastinating again. Okay, NATO was formed by an association of European and North American states. Yeah, hang on a sec. Let me show you. Revealed. The identity of Banksy, after years of anonymity by the world's most famous street artist, has been revealed. It's Robin Gunningham, born in Bristol, UK, 1973. Yeah, oh, for God's sake, Instagram crap. Hang on a sec. Hang on a sec. What's his name? Robin Gunningham. Here we go. Robin Gunningham. Who's Banksy unmasking the elusive street artist? Oh, this is old. Robin Gunningham. Here we go. Reuters found the artist. Flipping all this privacy crap. Okay. The British street artist's identity has been debated and closely guarded for decades. A quest to solve the riddle took Reuters from a bombed-out Ukrainian village to London and downtown Manhattan, and uncovered much more than a name. Hang on a sec. There's Banksy. Robin. Or Tobin. Robin. Given Banksy's celebrity, the name of the culprit now takes on significance. It wasn't Del Naja who defaced the billboard atop 675 Hudson Street. The man who confessed was Robin Gunningham. In addition to his signature, Gunningham is repeatedly named in court and police documents related to the arrest. Robin Gunningham. So they kind of called him out. Let me get back to Russia. He didn't go there. He kind of went there as well. Anyway, NATO was formed by an association of European and North American states for the defense of Europe and the North Atlantic against the dangers of Soviet aggression. In response, most of the communist states of Europe, under Russian leadership, formed the Warsaw Pact in 1955, a treaty for military defense and mutual aid. The pact was supposed to be made of iron, but with hindsight, by the early 1980s was rusting. And after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, it crumbled into dust. President Putin is no fan of the last Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev. He had like a big red splodge on his head. I remember him. Okay, he blames him for undermining Russian security and has referred to the breakup of the former Soviet Union during the 1990s as a major geopolitical disaster of the century. Let's see Putin slag off Gorbachev. Gorbachev. Love-hate Putin relationship. What is it? He's his friendship. Okay. Oh, he's dead as well. Pays tribute. Anyway.
By some as a betrayal of Russian history. Among those people, Vladimir Putin rose to power a decade later, has never ceased to praise the strength of the USSR. The relationship between two
Yeah, big splodge on his head there.
country's recent history has been ambiguous and deeply polarized at times. Despite the doubts, Mikhail Gorbachev at first approved Putin's election.
Yes, there is something about Putin that raises questions, but I believe that his course is correct.
But with the new Russian president describing the collapse of the Soviet Union as one of the major geopolitical catastrophes of the 20th century, Putin's stance was clear. Although he'd acknowledged some of his successes, Gorbachev warns that he shouldn't seek a third term as president.
It's enough because circles and clans are created around him. There's so much to root out.
As soon as Putin invaded Ukraine, his foundation released a statement calling for an early cessation of hostilities and immediate start of peace negotiations. One man remembered for his close relationship with the West. The other has now taken Russia further than it's ever been since Gorbachev first took hold of power.
And see, this is why I want to read Geopolitics. It all links to what's going on today. Okay, especially with Putin. No, especially with Putin gallivanting around Ukraine, and it's pretty much like become quite a powerful nation, given America the news that the American empire is going down. But we'll get to America in a minute. Okay, since then, the Russians have watched anxiously as NATO has crept steadily closer, incorporating countries which Russia claims it was promised would not be joining: the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland in 1999, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, and Slovakia in 2004, and Albania in 2009. NATO says no such assurances were given. I think this is where Russia got pissed off, and when Ukraine came on the paper and they said, that's it. NATO's going to have nothing to do with NATO. Ukraine's got nothing to do with NATO. We're taking steps. Okay. Russia, like a great power, is thinking in terms of the next 100 years and understands that in that time anything could happen. A century ago, who could have guessed that American armed forces would be stationed a few hundred miles from Moscow in Poland and the Baltic Sea? By 2004, just 15 years from 1989, every single former Warsaw Pact state bar Russia was in NATO or the European Union. Yeah, Russia feels they got shafted. Okay, the Moscow administration's mind has been concentrated by that and by Russia's history. Russia as a concept dates back to the 9th century and a loose federation of East Slavic tribes known as Kievan Rus. Is it Kievan Rus? Is that how you say it? Kievan Rus. Hang on a sec. Let's say what's Kievan Rus. Let's ask Claude this time. I'm gonna bring Claude over. Who are Kievan Rus? Kievan Rus, also written as Kievan Rus. I'm butchering that, aren't I? Try and say my name. That's a mouthful as well. That's what she said. Were a medieval federation of East Slavic, Finnic, and Norse people that formed the first major state in Eastern Europe, roughly from the 9th to the 13th century. Okay. Decline. Kievan Rus was weakened by internal fragmentation among rival princes and was ultimately destroyed by the Mongol invasion of 1237 to 1240, which devastated Kiev and most major cities. All right, thank you. I'll be gaming later anyway. I should do this in the morning. I'll normally do this in the morning, but I've had work to do, and then I game in the evening. Well, I'm playing catch up anyway. I should put like a timetable on my Twitch thing. I'll do that later. Okay, which was based in Kiev and other towns along the Dnieper River in what is now Ukraine. Let's see where the Dnieper River is. This is my whole point. Where's Dnieper River? Dnieper River. Is it Dnieper River? Dnieper River. Here it is. Let's go here. Dnieper River. I need to pin this. It's there somewhere. Okay. In what is now Ukraine, the Mongols, expanding their empire, continually attacked the region from the south and east, eventually overrunning it in the 13th century. We just read that as well. The fledgling Russia then relocated northeast in and around the city of Moscow. So they ran away from here, went up there. So go here, went up there. This early Russia, known as the Grand Principality of Muscovy, was indefensible. There were no mountains, no deserts, and few rivers. In all directions lay flatland, and across the steppe to the south and east were the Mongols. Their invaders could advance at a place of his choosing, and there were few natural defensive positions to occupy. So, essentially, hang on, where's Kiev? Kiev is there. All here, all flat, and the Mongols could take whichever route they wanted to. They had liberty to do whatever they like. Okay. Enter Ivan the Terrible, the first Tsar. He put into practice a concept of attack as defense, beginning your expansion by consolidating at home and then moving outwards. This led to greatness. Here was a man to give support to the theory that individuals can change history. Without his character of both utter ruthlessness and vision, Russian history would be very different. All right, let me see Ivan the Terrible. Was he the one who put all those spikes on, or was that somebody else? Spikes. Who was the one that put spikes and kind of like put it up there? Tushy. What made... Oh, for flip's sake, I should get my other... Get my, what's it called, subscribe YouTube account. Can't stand this. All right.
Are lucky enough to receive nicknames for what they achieved in their life. Alexander the Great, William the Conqueror, and if the history book unfolds like I hope it does, I shall be known as Patrick the
Yet one of the most famous was the Grand Prince, Paul Bertie, under the name Ivan Vasilievich. As a infamous is of course Ivan the Terrible, born on the 25th of August 1530 under the name Ivan Vasilievich IV. He is considered to be the first true Tsar of Russia. Before this, the head of Russia was known as the Muscovy, which was the Grand Prince. Yet Ivan took on the name Tsar himself, believing his powers came directly from God and controlled all of Russia. Yet Ivan hasn't gone down in the history books by the name Ivan IV or Ivan the First Tsar of Russia. He is known as Ivan the Terrible. But why? What did Ivan do in his lifetime to earn the name
Let me
Terrible?
just
Ivan
do
did
this.
a lot of terrible things in his lifetime. His terribleness could have begun in his childhood. Not so much because he wasn't terrible as a child, but he did have a pretty terrible childhood. His father died early in his life, leading Ivan to become Muscovy at the age of 3. However, his mother was power hungry. She took the power and sent her uncles to prison in hopes that they would not throw her power. Yet she didn't live too much longer after all of this, as she died too. It's believed she was poisoned by the boyar, the old aristocracy of Russia. With his mother dead, his father dead, and the majority of his close family sent to death by his own mother, Ivan was orphaned at 7.5 years old. He supposedly spent a lot of his childhood locked away with little food, as if he were a beggar in his own palace, and took pleasure in killing small animals. Many believe that Ivan had mental health issues. These were amplified after the death of his first wife, Anastasia. He was always known to suffer violent paranoia mood swings, yet after her death, his erratic behavior became even more erratic. His paranoia led to him forming secret police to enforce his will over the Russian population, perhaps even peaking in 1570 during the massacre of Novgorod. Novgorod was one of the key commercial hubs within the Russian Empire. Ivan believed the entire population of the town was plotting to overthrow him. Ivan and his men ransacked the town and put thousands to the sword, with Ivan himself leading the attack. And when he wasn't fighting his own people, he was waging war. A lot of war. One of Ivan's biggest wars was against the Tatars, who were a constant threat to Russia.
Tatars. Tatars.
St. Basil's Cathedral was built in honor of this victory, and legend holds that Ivan blinded the architects of the cathedral so they could never build something so beautiful again. Yet it's believed that truly one of the most terrible things he did was beat his own son to death. It was in the midst of one of his psychotic outbursts while he was having a disagreement with the boy who was the heir apparent, beating to death with a walking stick. Though this story has never been confirmed, it's a myth that has persisted in the history books. This, of course, has only been a brief introduction of some of the truly terrible things that Ivan did to earn himself that title of Ivan the Terrible. But about that name, it's believed that terrible was translated from the Russian word of glonzi, which actually closely translates more to inspiring fear of terror, threatening, or even awesome. Perhaps Ivan's fellow Russians wanted him to not be known as terrible, but rather as Tsar Ivan, who inspired terror in others.
Alright, so that's who he was. Let's get back to the book. The fledgling Russia had begun a moderate expansion under Ivan's grandfather, Ivan the Great, but that expansion accelerated after the younger Ivan came to power in 1533. It encroached east on the Urals. Alright, where are the Urals? East of the Urals. Okay. Down here. South to the Caspian Sea and towards the Arctic Circle. Okay, so the Caspian Sea, is that down? That's here, isn't it? That's this bit here. Let me check. So from here to here, okay, it gained access to the Caspian and later the Black Sea. So where's the Black Sea? That's the Caspian. Where's the Black Sea gone? Hang on, let me type it in here. Black Sea. Oh, where am I seeing? It's right next to it. Okay. Thus taking advantage of the Caucasus Mountains as a partial barrier between it and the Mongols. The Caucasus Mountains. Caucasus. Is it Caucasus Mountains or Caucasus Mountains? So that is here, Azerbaijan. So it's between two seas. This big bad boy here, right? So that was a barrier. The Mongols couldn't come up there. Okay. A military base was built in Chechnya to deter any would-be attackers, be they the Mongol Golden Hordes, the Ottoman Empire, or the Persians. There were setbacks, but over the next century, Russia would push past the Urals and edge into Siberia, eventually incorporating all the land to the Pacific coast far to the east. So eventually, under Ivan the Terrible, they would take all this land. There was not that much resistance anyway. Now, the Russians had a partial buffer zone and the hinterland, strategic depth, somewhere to fall back to in the case of invasion. No one was going to attack them in force from the Arctic Sea, nor fight their way over the Urals to get to them. Their land was becoming what we know now as Russia. And to get to it from the south or southeast, you had to have a huge army, a very long supply line, and fight your way past defensive positions. So basically, they were all here. To take them on, you're going to have to factor in all that area. So let's go here. In the 18th century, under Peter the Great, who founded the Russian Empire in 1721, and then Empress Catherine the Great looked westwards, expanding the empire to become one of the great powers of Europe, driven chiefly by trade and nationalism. A more secure and powerful Russia was now able to occupy Ukraine and reach the Carpathian Mountains. The Carpathian Mountains. All right, where's the Carpathian Mountains? Let me look at that. Carpathian Mountains. Carpathian Mountains. Here we go. So Romania, Moldova. So it's the northwest of the Caspian Sea. I want to see the mountains there. So basically that bit. The Carpathians here. The Carpathian Mountains. This is it. All that. Those are Carpathian Mountains. Is that it? Yeah, the Carpathian Mountains. Okay. It took over most of what we now know as the Baltic state. Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. Thus it was protected from any incursion via land that way, or from the Baltic Sea. Now there was a huge ring around Moscow, which was the heart of the country. Starting at the Arctic, it came down through the Baltic region, across Ukraine, then the Carpathians, the Black Sea, the Caucasus, and the Caspian, swinging back around to the Urals, which stretched up to the Arctic Circle. So, I'm going to say, there was a ring around Moscow. So, basically, all around here, Lithuania, blah, 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 Ukraine, down here, then you got the Urals around here. So, basically, Moscow's here, all around here. It's a ring around it, okay. In the 20th century, Communist Russia created the Soviet Union. Behind the rhetoric of the workers of the world unite, the USSR was simply the Russian Empire writ large. After the Second World War, it stretched from the Pacific to Berlin, from the Arctic to the borders of Afghanistan. Yeah, when you think about it, it's like it was from here. Where's it gone? Berlin. Berlin from here. It was basically, it was actually quite a lot bigger. So all that was the USSR. That from here right to the end. So it was a big bastard, wasn't it? From the Arctic to the borders of Afghanistan. A superpower economically, politically, and militarily, rivaled only by the United States. Russia is the biggest country in the world, twice the size of the USA or China, 5 times the size of India, 70 times the size of the UK. However, it has a relatively small population of about 144 million. Few people than Nigeria or Pakistan. Its agricultural growing season is short. I mean, with all that snow, it's going to be short, isn't it? And it struggles to adequately distribute what is grown around the 11 time zones which Moscow governs. This is what I was talking about, the tree map, wasn't I? tree map, land area. This was a tree map chart. Hang on a sec. Countries. They're not going to show tree. I've been looking for a tree map yesterday, wasn't I? All right. We haven't got a tree map. We've got this. This will be as okay. No. Up. No. Oh, for God's sakes! All right. Let me just go here. I want to look at. Let's go here. Let's go here. I want to do this. Give me a second. One sec. Continue. Right. Let me bring this here. Ah, okay. Go here. Okay, so oh, get off. We're playing later, not now. All right, so you got Russia, 3.3% of landmass of the Earth's surface. Antarctica, which is pretty much down south, 2.75%. Then Canada, then China, then US. It says UK is like, what's it called, 70 times the size? So effectively 3.35%. So it should be about 1%, I guess. Where's the UK? United Kingdom. Here we go. Oh, it's even less than that. 0.05% of landmass. Okay, so let's put that, close that. Let's go close, let's close the Steam crap here. We're doing gaming later. Be patient. All right. Okay, Russia up to the Urals. Let me minimize that. Stupid. Let's bring this map back up. Russia up to the Urals is a European power. So far, it has its borders, the European landmass, but it is not an Asian power despite bordering Kazakhstan, Mongolia, China, and North Korea, and having maritime borders with several countries, including Japan and the US. This is a phenomena that is Russia. Look, you got Alaska here. That's the US, and it borders Russia. Look at that. And this sometimes becomes frozen land, and you can actually navigate that. Let me bring that up on YouTube, actually. Hang on a sec. Frozen land between USA and Russia. The Bering Strait, that's what it's called. Look, go here. Where's the Bering Strait? The Bering Strait. Where is it gone? Where is the Bering Strait? Bering Strait. There we go. They call that the Bering Strait. We should just zoomed in there, the Bering Strait. So, let me bring this up.
You can technically walk from Russia to America, but almost no one survives it. In the middle of the Bering Strait, just 2 miles apart, are two tiny islands. One belongs to Russia, the other to the US. In winter, the ocean freezes solid enough that you could cross it on foot. But here's the catch. Brutal winds, shifting ice, and patrols on both sides make it nearly impossible. You can technically walk from Russia to America, but almost no one survives it. In the middle of the Bering Strait, just 2 miles apart, are two tiny islands. One belongs to Russia, the other to the US. In winter, the ocean freezes solid enough that you could cross it on foot. But here's the catch. Brutal winds, shifting ice, and patrols on both sides make it nearly impossible. You can technically
All right, you're getting annoying now. Okay, let's minimize that. Okay. Okay. So it borders Japan and USA. Okay. The former US vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin was mocked when she was reported as saying, I can't, let me do a Sarah Palin accent. Okay, I can't do it. All right. You can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska. A line which morphed in media coverage to, I can see Russia from my house. What she really said was, you can see Russia from land here in Alaska, from an island in Alaska. And she was right. Let me bring the piss take up. Everyone kind of took the mick out of it, actually. I remember that. Okay. YouTube. Palin, Sarah. I don't like adverts. Alaska. Russia. You can see Russia.
What insight into Russian actions, particularly in the last couple of weeks, does the proximity of the state give you?
There are next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
There's a longer quote. Hang on.
Let me ask you about some specific states should try to restore. Your administration has said we've got
Relations with Saakashvili there. I was able to.
the city of Abkhazia.
First off, we're going to continue good relations with Saakashvili there. I was able to speak with him, and we've got to keep an eye on such pressure, country, unprovoked, and we have got to keep our eyes on Russia under the leadership there.
Oh, it wasn't a quote here anyway. Anyway, but you saw in the earlier one. Let's go back here. She was right. A Russian island in the Bering Strait is 2.5 miles from the American island in the strait. That's what that short was talking about. There we go. So that belongs to Russia. That belongs to the US. Little Diomede. This is Diomede. Little Diomede Island, and can be seen with the naked eye. You can indeed see Russia from America. So from here, you can definitely see it. All right. Let's zoom out now. Let's go back to what it's going to talk about in the next paragraph. Here. High up in the Urals, there is a crossing mark, the place where Europe stops and Asia starts. So here. There's a crossing mark. Okay. Where the skies are clear, it is a beautiful spot, and you can see through the fir trees for miles towards the east. In winter, it is snow-covered, as is the Siberian plain you see below the stretching towards the city of I'm going to butcher this. Yekaterinburg. Let me just go here. Yekaterinburg. Let me see what this says. Yekaterinburg, Russia.
You pulled my dress for the gala?
Oh, for flip's sake. Can't stand ads. Go here. Let me bring up this one. How come this place ain't frozen? Let me just see this map on the map. Because it's not in the north, is it? It's on the... Oh, yeah. Hang on a second. So here. That's on the Urals, isn't it? Okay. Tourists like to visit to put one foot in Europe and one in Asia. It is a reminder of just how big Russia is when you realize that the cross is placed merely a quarter of the way into the country. Hang on a sec. 1 second. Let me just have a look at this. Cross. This cross. This cross.
Let's go and check out. Is the border. Oh, so we actually have to go around
two continents. And yeah, this is the border. So let's go back to Europe for a second and let's officially cross the border from Europe onto Asia. Mayday, здесь заложен камень о крайней точке Азии. Something about, yeah, this is Asia. I can't be bothered to translate literally.
I like this guy.
And on the other side, I imagine you have the same from Europa. Europe. Wow, thank you so much, Ivan. Europe, Asia,
Europe, Asia, Europe, Asia.
Asia. Oh, very fantastic.
That's the one thing I'd love to do more than well, I used to do quite a lot of travel. Okay, all right. Okay, where we go here. It is a reminder of just how big Russia is when you realize that the cross is placed merely a quarter of the way into the country. Okay, that's the quarter, and then the rest of the 2/3 is that. You may have traveled 1,500 miles from St. Petersburg through Western Europe to get to the Urals, but you still have another 4,500 miles to go before reaching the Bering Strait and a possible sighting of Mrs. Palin across from Alaska in the US. So St. Petersburg is down here, isn't it? Hang on a sec. St. Petersburg is my thingy, and oh, what the flip? Okay, St. Petersburg is down here. St. Petersburg's Russia. It's down here. Right here. Okay, there. Right here. All right. There. Shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, I was in the Urals at the point where Europe became Asia, accompanied by a Russian camera crew. The cameraman was a taciturn, stoic, grizzled veteran of filming. So it's like, yes, yes. Okay, so kind of like the textbook definition of what Russian looked like, kind of essentialist presentation of it. And was the son of the Red Army cameraman who had filmed a great deal of footage during the German siege of Stalingrad. I asked him, "So, are you European or are you Asian?" He reflected on this for a few seconds and then replied, "Neither. I am a Russian." I like that Russian accent, okay. Whatever its European credentials, Russia is not an Asian power for many reasons. Although 75% of its territory is in Asia, only 22% of its population lives there. Siberia may be Russia's treasure chest, containing the majority of the mineral wealth, oil and gas. But it is a harsh land, freezing for months on end, with vast forests, poor soil for farming, and large stretches of swampland. Only 2 railway networks run west to east, the Trans-Siberian and the Baikal-Amur main lines. Let me see the Trans-Siberian line. Hang on a second. I need to check this. The Trans-Siberian Railway. Look at that. Look at that. It looks...
Trans-Siberian Railroad is the world's longest and iconic railway, attracting many travelers from all around the world striving to see the miracle of engineering and to experience the ineffable journey. This incredible train is around 5,778 miles long, starting from Moscow in Europe to Vladivostok on the shores of the Pacific Ocean. In today's video, we will take you on a journey to its paths and places to its beautiful landscapes that the Trans-Siberian Railroad follows along the way. So, watch the video till the end because we are going to discuss everything about the most legendary railway lines on Earth.
They said earlier it takes 6 days to go there. I want to see the other one. The Baikal-Amur mainland. Hang on a second. Let's go here. The other Trans-Siberian. I like these travel channels. The YouTube ones. Not the posh ones that the BBC do. I like these ones. Especially that Cat's Curds. What's it called? Hang on a second. I want a short video.
Байкало-Амурская магистраль – сложнейший
Oh, it's Russian. What's the point of it?
These carriages are carrying the mineral wealth of eastern Siberia, westwards towards Moscow and further afield. And that is made possible for one reason, the BAM Railway.
BAM, Baikul Amur Mainland, BAM.
In the 1970s, with the Soviet economy stagnating, Brezhnev wanted to open up the vast untapped wealth of eastern Siberia. To do so, he had to build a railway line across that vast land. It was the greatest engineering project of the 20th century. It was known as the BAM, the Baikal-Amurska Main Line. Today, we're going to take a journey across it. Join me.
Not today, mate. I got reading to do. All right, okay. All right, there are a few transport routes leading north to south, and so no easy way for Russia to project power southward into modern Mongolia or China. It lacks the manpower and supply lines to do so. Okay, so they can go from west to east easy and east to west, but not downwards. Okay. China may well eventually control parts of Siberia in the long-term future, but this would be through Russia's declining birth rate and Chinese immigration moving north. Already as far west as the swampy West Siberian plain, between the Urals in the west and the Yenisei River, 1,000 miles to the east, you can see Chinese restaurants in most of the towns and cities. Many more different businesses are coming. The empty, depopulating space of Russia's Far East are even more likely to come under Chinese cultural and eventually political control. Right, let me see this, actually. Let me see more of this. Chinese in Siberia.
So I'm convinced people don't know Asian Russians exist. Every time I meet somebody new, they ask where I'm from. So I tell them I'm Buryat from Russia. They think I'm lying because I look Asian. People ask me if I'm Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. But Russia isn't just Slavic, guys. We have over 190 ethnic groups. Buryats, Tibet, Sakha, so many. Our people have lived on these lands for centuries, long before it became part of Russia. And the worst part is how Russians show the media. It's only blonde people in Moscow in forehead. And Buryats are just one of many Asian ethnic groups that has our own republic, language, and culture. Buryatia is home to Lake Baikal, the deepest lake in the world. We have our rich Buddhist traditions. No people know about Russia. It's vodka, snow, and blonde people. Are we serious? It just feels like our stories and cultures are completely invisible. Like Asian Russians don't exist in a global understanding of what Russia is. Nobody covers our stories. Nobody knows we exist. All I want is for our cultures and histories to be recognized. So that next time if I tell somebody I'm from Russia, they don't look shocked that I'm Asian and they don't ask me if I'm really Russian. So I'm convinced people don't know Asian Russians exist.
Yeah, they don't think I'm British either. See that? Blonde hair, blue eyes. Okay. When you move outside of the Russian heartland, much of the population in the Russian Federation is not ethnically Russian. See that? The video there kind of foreshadows that. And pays little allegiance to Moscow, which results in an aggressive security system similar to the one in Soviet days. During that era, Russia was effectively a colonial power ruling over nations and people who felt they had nothing in common with their masters. Part of the Russian Federation, for example, Chechnya and Dagestan in the Caucasus, still feels the same way. Let's go Dagestan. Where's it gone? Dagestan and Chechnya. Where's it gone? Dagestan. And let me just key it in. Dagestan, Russia. Where is it? There's Dagestan. And Chechnya. It's near here, isn't it? Give it a fair. Chechnya, Russia. Here we go. Come on. Oh, God. Chechnya. Grozny. Okay. Late in the last century, overstretched, spending more money than was available, the economics of the madhouse in a land not designed for people, and defeat in the mountains of Afghanistan all led to the fall of the USSR. the Russian Empire shrank back to the shape of more or less the pre-communist era, with its European borders ending at Estonia, Latvia, Belarus, Ukraine, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, in support of the communist Afghan government against anti-communist Muslim guerrillas, had never been about bringing the joys of Marxist-Leninism to the Afghan people. It was always about ensuring that Moscow controlled the space to prevent anyone else from doing so. This reminds me of like Rambo 3, where he's talking to the Afghans. He says, "They're good people." Hang on. Rambo 3. Afghans. Good people. This was before 9/11. Rambo in Afghanistan. The Mujahideen's Rambo. This is like full-on US pre-Berlin Wall, Cold War propaganda. Hang on a sec. Let me go here.
This is Afghanistan. Alexander the Great tried to conquer this country. Then Genghis Khan, then the British. Now Russia. But Afghan people fight hard. May never be defeated. Ancient enemy, make prayer about these people. You wish to hear? Very good. It says, "May God deliver us from the venom of the cobra, teeth of the tiger, and the vengeance of the Afghan." You understand what this means?
That you guys don't take any shit.
Yes. Something like this.
They also say Afghanistan is the place where empires go to die. So, Afghanistan, empires die. Afghanistan is often referred to as the graveyard of empires because foreign powers, including the British Empire, the Soviet Union, and the United States, have historically failed to achieve lasting military victory or hold the territory, suffering high losses. While popular, this reputation is often considered an oversimplification. So you see that? Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires. Number of military deaths in foreign interventions. Look, so you don't go there. You just leave it alone. If you want to survive, just stay away from it. I'll read that, but I've got more reading to do anyway. Let's go back to this. Okay. Crucially, the invasion of Afghanistan also gave hope to the great Russian dream of his army being able to wash their boots in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. In the words of the ultra-nationalistic Russian politicians Vladimir Zhirinovsky, I got that one, and thus achieve what it never had, a warm water port where the water does not freeze in winter. Yeah, you kind of think about it, the way Russia's what's called environment is. It's cool and it's harsh, and a little drop of warm water is going to be very, very attractive proposition for them, isn't it? With the free access to the world's major trading routes, that's another point. The ports on the Arctic, such as Murmansk, freeze for several months each year. Vladivostok, the largest Russian port in the Pacific Ocean, is ice-locked for about 4 months and is enclosed by the Sea of Japan. So this is where the maritime one comes in. Look at that. There is nothing in the north. Nothing. Let me just put this on here. Murmansk. Murmansk, where's Murmansk? So let's go here. So that's on the tip of Finland. Murmansk here. There's nothing. Nothing goes there. Vladivostok. Can I find it here? Vladivostok. Oh, for flip's sake, not there. Gotta go here. Vladivostok. Where's that? That's on the other side of it. Hang on a sec. Vladivostok. This one's a bit better. Where's Vladivostok? It's kind of a little bit off South Korea. Yeah, Vladivostok. Vladivostok, where are you? It's around here. Okay. Let's go here. It's frozen most of the time. By the Sea of Japan, which is dominated by the Japanese. So the Japanese are pretty much dealing with the trade routes there. This does not just halt the flow of trade. It prevents the Russian fleet from operating as a global power. In addition, waterborne transport is much cheaper than land or airborne routes. However, with the imposing plains of Kandahar and mountains of the Hindu Kush, no invading powers ever succeeded in Afghanistan. So the Hindu Kush is around here. This is the Hindu Kush. Is it that? That's the Hindu Kush. Is that the Hindu Kush? Hindu Kush. Kandahar and mountains of Hindu Kush. Yeah, that's the Hindu Kush. And Kandahar. Kandahar is a little bit on the other side, isn't it? Yeah. So basically, all this region, this part here makes it difficult for Russia to come down. They can't go down here. They yearn to get this access. Okay. No invading powers ever succeeded in Afghanistan, earning it the label of the graveyard of empires. Yeah, well, I kind of foreshadowed that one as well. The Afghan experience is sometimes called Russia's Vietnam. Moscow's dream of warm water, open sea lane has seeped away ever since, and is perhaps further now than it has been for 200 years. This lack of a warm water port with direct access to the ocean has always been Russia's Achilles heel, as strategically important to it as the North European plain. Russia is at a geographical disadvantage, say from being a much weaker power only because of its oil and gas. No wonder, in his will of 1725, that Peter the Great advised his descendants to approach as near as possible to Constantinople and India. Whoever governs there will be the true sovereign of the world. Consequently, excite continual wars not only in Turkey but in Persia, penetrate as far as the Persian Gulf, advance as far as India. I kind of think he foretold the point that India would be a global power and just how crucial the Middle East would be. All that. So he was saying, get these places if you want to be a world power. But Russia, I don't think they're not coming out in the open and saying it. When the Soviet Union broke apart, it split into 15 countries. Geography has its revenge on the ideology of the Soviets, and a more logical picture reappeared on the map. One in which mountains, rivers, lakes and seas delineated where people lived, are separated from each other, and thus how they develop different languages and customs. The exception of this rule are the stands, which are the Tajikistan's, whose borders were deliberately drawn by Stalin so as to weaken each state by ensuring it has a large minority of people from other states. So these mountainous regions here cause a lot of difficulties, we would say. Okay. In being able to keep hold of those areas. Okay, if you take the long view of history, and most diplomats and military planners do, then there is still everything to play for in each of the states which formerly made up of the USSR, plus some of those previously in the Warsaw Pact military alliance. They can be divided three ways: those that are neutral, the pro-Western group, and the pro-Russian group. Let me look at the Warsaw Pact. Let's go here. Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact, formerly the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance, TFCMA, was a collective defense treaty signed in Warsaw, Poland, between the Soviet Union and 7 other Eastern Bloc socialist republics in Central and Eastern Europe. Okay, so it's from Russia, Germany, Hungary, Czech, Slovaks, Romanian, Albanian, Bulgarian, Polish. So member states. Why don't you just go here? Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, Poland, Romania, and Russia, Soviet Union. The neutral countries, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan, are those with few reasons to ally themselves with Russia or the West. This is because all three produce their own energy and are not beholden to either side for their security or trade. In the pro-Russian camp are Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Belarus, and Armenia. Their economies are tied to Russia in the way that much of eastern Ukraine's economy is. Another reason for the rebellion there. The largest of these, Kazakhstan, leans towards Russia diplomatically, and its large Russian minority population is well integrated. Okay, where's Kazakhstan? Let me check Kazakhstan. So this is Kazakhstan, this big bad boy here. It's got every reason to be friendly because it borders it. If they kind of go against Kazakhstan, Russia, they're going to be screwed, aren't they? And Tajikistan, where's Tajikistan? Belarus. I mean, these are all borders here. Kyrgyzstan is probably around here as well. Let me see Kyrgyzstan. They're all borders. Huh? Kyrgyzstan, yeah. Well, okay, that's not so much of a border, but they're kind of close, okay. Of the 5, all but Tajikistan have joined Russia in the new Eurasian Economic Union. Tajikistan. 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 Kyrgyzstan is there. Tajikistan is just here. It's nowhere near Europe. Eurasian European Union. A sort of poor man's EU. Okay, read on sharp. Which celebrated its first anniversary in January 2016. And all 5 are in a military alliance with Russia called the Collective Security Treaty Organization. The CSTO suffers from not having a name you can boil down to one word, and from being a watered-down Warsaw bloc. Russia maintains a military presence in Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Armenia. And then there are the pro-Western countries, formerly in the Warsaw Pact, but now all in NATO and or the European Union. Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, the Czech Republic. Where's the Czech Republic? That's not around here, isn't it? Czech Republic should be here. That was Czech Republic, wasn't it? Czechia. Bulgaria. Where's Bulgaria? Where's Bulgaria? Somewhere here. Need to give it some. It's due. Bulgaria. Here you go. Hungary. Yeah? Hungary. Thirsty. Slovakia. Albania. 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 Here. Albania. Romania. So pretty much there. Okay. By no coincidence, many are among the states which suffered most under Soviet tyranny. Oh, well, there you go. Add to these Georgia, Ukraine. Where's Georgia? Georgia's around here, isn't it? Where's Georgia? Oh, come on. Oh, I just saw it. Georgia. There's Georgia. Ukraine. Moldova. Where's Moldova? Moldova here, Ukraine, these three countries here, which would all like to join both organizations but are being held at arm's length because their geographic proximity to Russia and because all three have Russian troops or pro-Russian militia on their soil. NATO membership of any of these three could spark a war, like in Ukraine, which is the reason why I want to study geopolitics. So it's not this case, which is pretty much a red flag for Russia. There's also Moldova and Georgia. We saw that back in 2014, I think. Was it 2014? Correct me if I'm wrong. All of the above explain why in 2013, as the political battle for the direction of Ukraine heated up, Moscow concentrated hard. As long as the pro-Russian government held sway in Kiev, the Russians could be confident that its buffer zone would remain intact and guard the North European plains. Even a studiedly neutral Ukraine, which would promise not to join the EU or NATO and to uphold the lease Russia had on the warm water port at Sevastopol. Sevastopol is around here, isn't it? Sevastopol here. This one's quite important in the Black Sea. In Crimea. This is Crimea here. Crimea. It's Crimea. This is Crimea. I want to be Crimea. Where's Crimea? Well, show me Crimea. Crimean Peninsula. Crimea Peninsula. Here we go. This is all Crimea. Yeah? So I was right. That Ukraine was reliant on Russia for energy was also made its increasingly neutral stance acceptable. Albeit irritating. But a pro-Western Ukraine with ambitions to join the two great Western alliances, and which threw into doubt Russia's access to its Black Sea port. A Ukraine that one day might even host a NATO naval base. That could not stand. President Viktor Yanukovych of Ukraine tried to play both sides. He flirted with the West but paid homage to Moscow. Thus Putin tolerated him. When he came close to signing a massive trade agreement with the EU, one which could lead to membership, Putin began to turn the screw. Let me look at this President Viktor Yanukovych. Viktor Yanukovych. He ran away.
This footage, the video has emerged which appears to show President Yanukovych's entourage fleeing from his luxurious mansion outside Kiev.
Why did he split? Let me have a look.
Developments in Ukraine after those deadly protests, the government firing back. The president tonight is in hiding, and just look at the images coming in now. Families wandering the grounds of his luxury home outside the capital today, taking turns playing on his private golf course, helping themselves to his golf clubs. And now the former prime minister is now free from prison, where the president had put her, reaching out to her supporters right there. But with no one in charge tonight, America watching very closely, a country that had been moving closer to Russia and away from the West, now in a dangerous limbo. ABC's Alex Marquardt in Kiev tonight. Alex.
Good evening, David. What we saw here today was a revolution. For the second time in a decade, Ukraine has ousted its president, sending shockwaves from Washington to Moscow and dealing a massive blow to Vladimir Putin's Russia.
Jubilation on the streets of the Ukrainian capital as protesters took control of Kiev and President Viktor Yanukovych was impeached. It comes after months of protest against him, almost 100 killed. Kiev's Independence Square has been the bloody battleground for the protesters who want an end to corruption and rights abuses to become closer to and more like Europe and the U.S. Yanukovych, who has kept Ukraine closely tied to Russia, has fled the capital. Today, he refused to resign, comparing the impeachment to the Nazis coming to power. This afternoon, crowds of curious Ukrainians streamed into Yanukovych's sprawling compound. I can't believe that such place can exist in Ukraine. On its golf course, Anton Ivanov found this club, Yanukovych's initials engraved.
You just imagine all the ranges of the corruption that
It's straight at me. Nearby, a zoo with ostriches and peacocks. Elsewhere, a garage with dozens of antique luxury cars. The anger over the opulence here quieted by the hope that this chapter is now over. The next chapter will likely feature Yulia Tymoshenko, a longtime foe of the president's, who was just released from prison today. She spoke to protesters tonight here on Independence Square, calling them heroes, but telling them not to go home, that their job here is not yet finished. David? Alex, our thanks to you again tonight.
Okay. So that's how much of the screw was turned. He kind of ran away from there, didn't he? All right. Okay. For the Russian foreign policy elite, membership of the EU is simply a stalking horse for membership of NATO. And for Russia, Ukrainian membership of NATO is a red line. Putin piled the pressure on Yanukovych, made him an offer he chose not to refuse. So he accepted it. He chose to accept it. Not to. That's like a double negative, isn't it? And the Ukrainian president scrambled out the EU deal and made a pact with Moscow, thus sparking the protests which were eventually to overthrow him. The Germans and the Americans had backed the opposition parties, with Berlin in particular seeing former world boxing champion turned politician Vitaly Klitschko as their man. The West was pulling Ukraine intellectually and economically towards it, while helping pro-Western Ukrainians to push it westwards by training and funding some of the democratic opposition groups. Let me have a look at this Klitschko. Vitaly Klitschko. He's the American shithead who plays chicks with bricks. Where's that from?
Putin says he's only targeting military targets.
Bullshit. Sorry. Where is military target? This building is military target.
Putin says he's only targeting military targets.
Bullshit.
Trump before Trump. Okay. Street fighting erupted in Kiev and demonstrations across the country grew. In the east, crowds came out in support of the president, while in the west of the country, in cities such as Lviv, which used to be in Poland. My brother, little brother, autistic brother says, Lviv here, now it's in Ukraine. They were busy trying to rid themselves of any pro-Russian influence. By mid-February 2014, Lviv and other urban areas were no longer controlled by the government. Then on the 22nd of February, after dozens of deaths in Kiev, the president, fearing for his life, fled. Anti-Russian factions some of which were pro-Western and some pro-fascist, took over the government. From that moment, the die was cast. President Putin did not have much of a choice. He had to annex Crimea, which contained not only many Russian-speaking Ukrainians, but, most importantly, the port of Sevastopol. And I'm going to be bringing up another video of Putin and Crimea port. Oh, this is neat. Okay.
Russian President Vladimir Putin thumbed his nose at the world when he took Crimea from Ukraine, and it looks like he plans to hold on to it forever, based on the bridge he's now building. Elizabeth Palmer went to the construction site in Russia.
24 hours a day, in 3 shifts, workers are racing to build a colossal bridge 12 miles long and strong enough to resist ferocious winds, earthquakes, and ice.
There is no doubt that this bridge is an engineering feat, a really impressive technical achievement, but it's also a bold political statement.
The bridge will connect southern Russia to the Crimean Peninsula, which, until 2014, belonged to Ukraine. Then, in March of that year, Russian troops seized Crimea. After a hasty referendum, President Putin announced it was now part of Russia. condemned. But even when America and its allies slapped on sanctions, he didn't back off. This $3 billion mega project shows he's doubling down on the land grab. The bridge, due to open next year, will be Crimea's umbilical cord to Mother Russia. Trains, cars, and trucks crossing this giant span will carry everything from food to tourists. Already, it's a source of pride and a local attraction. At a lookout on the shore of Vladimir Kurilkov and his friends have come to marvel and pose for pictures. Absolutely. The bridge underlines that Crimea is ours, he tells me, and we are never giving it back.
Officially, America is saying Russia has to do just that. Give Crimea back to Ukraine to get those punishing sanctions lifted. But 12 miles of concrete and steel are saying that's just not going to happen. Anthony?
Elizabeth Palmer in London.
Yeah, so did Putin, he gave back... let me just check. Gives back... Does Russia still hold Crimea? Hang on a sec. Let me bring up ChatGPT. I just want to double check this. Did Putin/Russia give back Crimea? Has not returned Crimea. Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 and it remains under Russian control. Ukraine and most of the international community, including the United Nations, still consider Crimea as part of Ukraine. Russia, on the other hand, claims Crimea, hang on, let me zoom in, as its own territory, and there have been no official moves by Russia to give it back. In fact, Russia has invested in infrastructure there and integrated it politically and administratively. If you want, I can summarize the current international status and the sanctions related to Crimea too. It's a bit tangled but interesting. So what's that tunnel, the oil tunnel? Has this got to do with the gas tunnel? I've forgotten the name of that tunnel actually, so pardon me if I sound a bit dim. Between Russia and Germany. But I forgot the name. Okay. You're probably thinking of the Nord Stream. That's the one. The gas pipeline under the Baltic Sea connecting Russia and Germany, and actually two main lines, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. Here's the connection or lack thereof with Crimea. Direct link. There isn't a direct formal link between Crimea and the Nord Stream pipeline. Crimea is in the Black Sea. That's obvious. Indirect link. Both Crimea and Nord Stream are part of a broader tension between Russia and Europe over energy and geopolitics. For example, Russia's control of Crimea gives it strategic advantage in the Black Sea. Okay, one sec. Okay, it's pretty obvious. All right, so the Nord Stream is up here, I guess. I'll come back to that in a second. Nord Stream pipelines give Russia leverage over European gas. Western sanctions over Crimea 2014 and the Ukraine conflict have influenced Nord Stream projects, especially Nord Stream 2, which has halted and never fully activated due to political and security concerns. So while they're connected through bigger picture of Russian-European relations and energy politics, the pipeline itself isn't payment for Crimea or anything like that. It's more about leverage and influence. Okay. Let's get back to the main reading. Okay. This geographic imperative and the whole eastward movement of NATO is exactly what Putin had in mind when, in a speech about the annexation, he said, Russia found itself in a position it could not retreat from. If you compress the spring all the way to its limit, it will snap back hard. You must always remember this. Sevastopol is Russia's only true major warm water port. The warm water. However, access out of the Black Sea into the Mediterranean is restricted by the Monroe Convention of 1936, which gave Turkey, now a NATO member, control of the Bosporus. Okay, let me find where the Bosporus is. Copy, paste, Bosporus, Turkey. So, where's Bosporus? I can't see it here. There we go. There's Bosporus. Oh, for flip's sake. There. And Bosporus. So, that's Crimea here. Don't know if you can see it. There's Crimea, Black Sea, and there's Bosporus. Okay. And the Aegean Sea before accessing the Mediterranean. So the Aegean Sea is probably this bit here. That's the Sea of Marmara. Where's the Aegean Sea? Let's go by. There we go, the Aegean Sea there. And would still have either to cross the Gibraltar Straits to gain access to the Atlantic Ocean or be allowed down the Suez Canal to reach the Indian Ocean. So the Gibraltar Straits, that's here somewhere. Gibraltar. I don't want to risk making a fool of myself again. Gibraltar Straits here. That's the Gibraltar Straits. Okay. So from here, it's got to go across there, down there. Hold on a sec. So that's the Gibraltar Straits. I knew Gibraltar's in Spain, but why am I that dumb anyway? So it goes from here all the way down there, up here, here. It's got to either go this way or here. The Russians do have a small naval presence in Tartus on Syria's Mediterranean coast. Tartus here. This partially explains their support for the Syrian government when fighting broke out in 2011. But it is a limited supply and replenishment base, not a major force. Another strategic problem is that in the event of war, the Russian Navy cannot get out of the Baltic Sea either due to the Skagerrak Strait. Okay, there's loads of straits here. So you can't go here from Russia with love. You can't. Oh, close down here. So it can't. So it can go from Russia down here. Then that's here, which connects to the North Sea. The narrow strait is controlled by NATO members Denmark and Norway. So the strait is controlled these two. And even if the ships made it, this route to the Atlantic goes through what is known as the GU-UK gap, Greenland and Iceland and UK gap. So this gap here. So if they go through here, then they still have to contend with all this stuff here. In the North Sea, which we will see more when we look at Western Europe. Having annexed Crimea, let's go back to Crimea here. Having annexed Crimea, the Russians are wasting no time. They're building up the Black Sea Fleet as Sevastopol and constructing a new naval port in the Russian city of Novorossiysk. Okay, let's see where this is now. That's over here. Let's bring that up. Oh, for flip's sake here. Novorossiysk is here. So it's building it here. I'm zooming. Building it here. And he's building it here. So 2 ports here. Okay. Which, although it does not have a natural deep harbour, will give the Russians extra capacity. 80 new ships are being commissioned. 80. as well as several submarines. The fleet will still not be strong enough to break out of the Black Sea during wartime, but its capacity is increasing. When you think about this here, this is a very, very politically powerful and politically volatile region, because you've got the Middle East here, and Russia is setting its base here. So it's quite a scary state of affairs when you think about it. So it's here. So if the US try to come down here or down here, then Russia's going to say, got away from here. This house, okay. The fleet will still not be strong enough to break out of the Black Sea during wartime, but its capacity is increasing. To counter this, in the next decade, we can expect to see USA encouraging its NATO partners, Romania, to boost its fleet in the Black Sea while relying on Turkey to hold the line across Bosporus. So Russia's building here, Romania and Turkey's building here. Crimea was part of Russia for 2 centuries before being transferred to the Soviet Republic of Ukraine in 1954 by President Khrushchev at a time when it was envisaged that Soviet man would live forever and so be controlled by Moscow forever. Now that Ukraine was no longer Soviet or even pro-Russian, Putin knew the situation had to change. Did the Western diplomats know? If they didn't, then they were unaware of Rule A, Lesson 1 in Diplomacy for Beginners. When faced with what is considered an existential threat, a great power will use force. If they were aware, then they must have considered Putin's annexation of Crimea a price worth paying for pulling Ukraine into modern Europe and the Western sphere of influence. So it's kind of like Russia went in here and then the United Nations went, whoop, whoop, let's take. So they went that way. All right. A generous view is that the USA and the Europeans were looking forward to welcoming Ukraine into the democratic world as a full member of its liberal institutions and the rule of law, and that there wasn't much Moscow could do about it. That is a view which does not take into account the fact that geopolitics still exists in the 21st century, or that Russia does not play by the rules of law. Flushed with victory, the new interim Ukrainian government had immediately made some foolish statements, not least of which was the intention to abolish Russians as the official second language in various regions. Given that these regions were the ones with the most Russian speakers and pro-Russian sentiments, and indeed includes Crimea, this was bound to spark a backlash. It also gave President Putin the propaganda he needed to make the case that ethnic Russians inside Ukraine needed to be protected. The Kremlin has a law which compels the government to protect ethnic Russians. A definition of that term is, by design, hard to come by because it will be defined as Russia chooses in each of the potential crises which may erupt in the former Soviet Union. When it suits the Kremlin, ethnic Russians will be defined simply as people who speak Russian as their first language. At other times, the new citizenship law will be used, which states that if your grandparents lived in Russia and Russian is your native language, you can take Russian citizenship. Given that as the crisis arises, people will be inclined to accept Russian passports to hedge their bets. This will be a lever for Russian entry into a conflict. Approximately 60% of Crimea's population is ethnically Russian, so the Kremlin was pushing against an open door. Putin helped the anti-Kiev demonstration and stirred up so much trouble that eventually he had to send his troops out to the confines of the naval base and into the streets to protect people. The Ukrainian military in the area was in no shape to take on both the people and the Russian army, and swiftly withdrew. Crimea was once again a de facto part of Russia. So let me have a look at the protests, actually. Anti-Kiev demonstration. Anti-Kiev demonstrations.
supporters have confronted protesters in central Kiev. The crowd of about 2,000 came down to the barricade at Independence Square, known as Maidan, blocking traffic on the capital's main avenue. But anti-government protesters who were camped out in the square have vowed to continue their demonstrations until their political demands are met. They say they want to see constitutional change, which would strip the president of some of his powers. One protester said, "At some point we will rise up, and Ukraine has already risen up, but there are no significant results so far. We hope the authorities will understand that we're fed up with being under the yoke of Moscow." At least 6 people have died since the protests broke out in November. Close to the barricades, demonstrators placed wooden crosses, which they say represent the number of dead and disappeared since the protests began.
Okay. You could make the argument that President Putin did have a choice. He could have disrespected the territorial integrity of Ukraine. But given that he was dealing with the geographic hand of God, has dealt Russia, this was never really an option. He will not be the man who lost Crimea, and with it the only proper warm water port his country had access to. I've got to start flagging this point, is I'm beginning to notice that Tim Marshall is good in writing what he's written, very good journalist, very good author, but you can begin to sense that he's presenting the Western narrative, the European narrative. It harkens me to ask, it pretty much forced me to ask, okay, what's the other side? You got to take more of a dialectic approach. You can't just read one side of the story. You got to read both sides. It's something that my professor Zaki Badawi, I was one of his last batch of students, his real student. Okay, there's a lot of people out there who say Zaki Badawi was my teacher. They were hardly in class. I was there for the last year. Okay, and then I ran his college for 5-6 years. I was pretty much the man at the Muslim college, Zaki Badawi's Muslim college, by the way. Okay, that's going to be another long story. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so I need to flag that point, is this an impartial narrative that Tim Marshall's presenting to us here? No one rode to the rescue of Ukraine as its lost territory equivalent to the size of Belgium or the US state of Maryland. Ukraine and its neighbors knew a geographic truth, that unless you are in NATO, Moscow is near, Washington DC is far away. For Russia, this was an existential matter. They could not cope with losing Crimea. The West could. The EU imposed limited sanctions, limited because several European countries, including Germany among them, are reliant on Russian energy to heat their homes in winter. The pipeline runs east to west, and the Kremlin can turn the tap on and off. This is where we're talking about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Let me bring that up a bit. Nord Stream pipeline.
Nord Stream 1 is the biggest pipeline transporting natural gas between Russia and Europe via Germany. It runs from Viborg in Russia to Greifswald in Germany. In 2021, Russia supplied nearly 40% of the EU's natural gas needs through this pipeline. It is majorly owned by Gazprom. The twin pipeline system of Nord Stream can transport 55 billion cubic meters of gas from Russia to Europe through the Baltic Sea. What is the politics around Nord Stream 1? Russia is using the supplies via the crucial pipeline as a bargain to navigate its economy through sanctions from the Western countries imposed in response to its invasion of Ukraine in February. Why the pipeline is significant for Germany? Energy prices in Germany, Europe's largest economy, are among the lowest in the continent. This is made possible due to cheap gas supplies via Nord Stream 1. This also makes
Hang on a sec. So 2 is alongside here. Okay.
This also makes German manufactured goods more competitive in the international market. Russian threats to choke this gas supply to Europe present an economic threat to Germany. To expand its options and double the gas supply from Russia, Germany had decided to build Nord Stream 2, but it was halted in February post Russia's attack on Ukraine.
Okay. Okay. Energy as political power will be deployed time and again in the coming years, and the concept of ethnic Russians will be used to justify whatever moves Russia makes. In a speech in 2014, President Putin briefly referred to Novorossiya, or New Russia. The Kremlin watchers took a deep breath. He had revived the geographic title given to what is now southern and eastern Ukraine. Southern and eastern Ukraine, which Russia had won from the Ottoman Empire during the reign of Catherine the Great in the late 18th century. Catherine went on to settle Russians in these regions and demanded that Russia be the first language. Novorossiya was only ceded to the newly formed Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic in 1922. Why? Asked Putin rhetorically. Let God judge them. In his speech, he listed the Ukrainian region of Kharkiv, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson. If I butchered this, and apologies, yeah. Mykolaiv and Odessa before saying Russia lost these territories for various reasons, but the people remained. Several million ethnic Russians still remain inside what was the USSR, outside of Russia. Yeah, it kind of goes without saying, isn't it? I mean, territories change, but the people remain, and that's the sad state of affairs in the world today. Take, for example, India and Pakistan. Ethnically, they're South Asian, and I always say that there's no such thing as somebody who's ethnically Pakistani or ethnically Indian. You're ethnically Punjabi, because the state of Punjab has this long, vast history, and you can clearly tell when somebody's Punjabi. But no one's ethnically Pakistani Punjabi or Pakistani Indian. So I often say to people that the partition occurred on land, but the partition didn't happen at the genetic level, at the cellular, the DNA level. Okay. Novorossiya over Kiev. I need to look at this short.
Russia shifted to a strategy of attrition, leveraging its larger population and industrial base against a much smaller and weakened Ukraine. The new goal: consolidate control over southeastern Ukraine, Novorossiya, a region with deep historical ties to Russia, incorporated into Soviet Ukraine by Lenin to counterbalance the more nationalist West. After the Russian Revolution, Lenin attached Novorossiya's industrial centers, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Odessa, to the Ukrainian Socialist Soviet Republic, not for ethnic reasons, but to strengthen Soviet control. The move ensured Ukraine's economic viability and gave the Bolsheviks a working-class base essential for spreading Soviet power, especially considering the predominant peasant Western Ukraine. Russia shifted to a strategy of attrition.
Okay, I was just kind of sifting through, about a third through, so it is no surprise that after seizing Crimea, Russia went on to encourage the uprising by pro-Russians in the Ukrainian eastern industrial heartland of Luhansk and Donetsk. Russia could easily drive militarily all the way to the eastern bank of the Dnieper River in Kiev. Okay, let me just keep up with this now. Donetsk. Donetsk is there. Let's close that. And Luhansk. Let's open this up. Spin that. Let's close this. Luhansk. Okay. But it does not need the headache that would bring. It is far less painful and cheaper to encourage unrest in the eastern borders of Ukraine and remind Kiev who controls energy supplies. To ensure that Kiev's infatuation with the flirtatious West does not turn into a marriage consummated in the chambers of the EU or NATO. That's quite poetic. The flirtatious West does not turn into a marriage consummated in the chambers of the EU or NATO. He must have AI'd that, but this is before AI anyway. Covert support for the uprising in eastern Ukraine was also logistically simple and had the added benefit of deniability on the international stage. Barefaced lying in the great chambers of the UN Security Council is simple if your opponent does not have concrete proof of your actions and, more importantly, does not want concrete proof in case he or she has to do something about it. Many politicians in the West breathed a sigh of relief and muttered quietly, "Thank goodness Ukraine isn't in NATO, or we would have had to act." Yeah, so there's this reluctance to accept Ukraine even from the Europeans, yes, sides of Europe. The annexation of Crimea showed how Russia is prepared for military action to defend what it sees as its interest in what it calls its near abroad. It took a rational gamble that outside powers would not intervene and Crimea was doable. Go away. Go away. Go away. Okay. I don't want to walk there. It is close to Russia and could be supplied across the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, and could rely on international support from large sections of the population of the peninsula. Russia has not finished with the Ukraine yet, nor elsewhere. Unless it feels threatened, Russia will probably not send its troops all the way into the Baltic Sea. One sec. Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea. Baltic Sea. Oh, come on. Baltic states. What am I talking about? What's it Baltic Sea for? Baltic. Ah! Baltic Sea. I just want to be very, very careful. The Baltic states are all around here. Or any further forward than it already is in Georgia. But it will push its power in Georgia. And in this volatile period, further military action cannot be ruled out. Russia's kind of... It's like Hulk Hogan. Well, Hulk Hogan sucks. What can I say? Brock Lesnar. However, just as Russia's action in its war with Georgia in 2008 were a warning to NATO to come no closer, so NATO's message to Russia in the summer of 2014 was, this far west and no further. A handful of NATO warplanes were flown into the Baltic states. So, you come here, Russia pushes back. And Europe says, you come here, and then Europe pushes back. So, at the top here, Europe says no, no. And over here, Russia says no, no. A handful of NATO warplanes were flown to the Baltic states. Military exercises were announced in Poland, and the Americans began planning to pre-position extra hardware as close to Russia as possible. At the same time, there was a flurry of diplomatic visits by defense and foreign ministers to the Baltic states, Georgia, and Moldova to reassure them of support. Some commentators poured scorn on the reaction, arguing that 6 RAF Eurofighter Typhoon jets flying over Baltic airspace was hardly going to deter the Russian hordes. But the reaction was about diplomatic signalling. You can see I'm preparing for our next video. But the reaction, diplomatic signalling, and the signal was clear. NATO is prepared to fight. Indeed, it would have to, because if it failed to react to an attack on a member state, it would instantly be obsolete. The Americans, who are already edging towards a new foreign policy in which they feel less constrained by existing structure and are prepared to forge new ones as they perceive the need arises, are deeply unimpressed with the European countries' commitment to defense spending. Let me bring up the next video. I want to see what these fighter jets are about. Eurofighter Typhoons.
In June 2012, 8 Eurofighter Typhoons from the Luftwaffe's 74th Tactical Air Force Wing were deployed to Eielson Air Force Base in Alaska to participate in the Red Flag exercise. During the exercise, the Typhoons engaged in numerous dogfights with F-22 Raptors, all of which took place within visual range. The German pilots utilized infrared sensors to detect the Raptors at a distance of approximately 15 miles. Aware of the Raptors' capabilities in long-range warfare, the Typhoons flew swiftly to counter their adversary's strengths. The German pilots employed integrated helmet-mounted sights to lock onto their targets and achieved 4 kills against the F-22s by simply aiming and firing at the aircraft. However, the Eurofighters were flying without missiles or fuel tanks on their wings, whereas the F-22 Raptors were equipped with external fuel tanks, which reduced their maneuverability. Since these dogfights were conducted within visual range, the F-22's stealth capabilities and beyond visual range combat advantages were neutralized, giving the Typhoons an initial advantage. In June 20...
Cool. Planes, trains, automobiles. Okay. In the case of the 3 Baltic states, NATO's position is clear. 3 Baltic states. As they are all members of the alliance, armed aggression against any of them by Russia would trigger Article 5 of NATO's founding charter, which states, an armed attack against one or more NATO member states in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against all of them. And goes on to say that NATO will come to the rescue if necessary. Article 5 was invoked after the terrorist attack in the United States on 11th September 2001, paving the way for NATO's involvement in Afghanistan. President Putin is a student of history. He appears to have learnt the lesson of the Soviet years in which Russia overstretched itself and was forced to contract. An overt assault on the Baltic states would likewise be overstretching and is unlikely, especially if NATO and its political masters ensure that Putin understands their signals. But at the beginning of 2016, the Russian president sent his own signal. He changed the wording of Russia's overall military strategy document and went further than the naval strategy paper of 2015. For the first time, the USA was named as an external threat to Russia. Ooh! Russia does not have to send an armored division into Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia. Doesn't have to go here to influence events there, but if it ever does, it would justify the action by claiming that the large Russian communities there are being discriminated against. In both Estonia and Latvia, approximately 1 in 4 people are ethnically Russian, and in Lithuania it is 5.8%. In Estonia, the Russian speakers say they are underrepresented in government and thousands do not have any form of citizenship. This does not mean they want to be part of Russia, but they are one of the levers Russia can pull to influence events. The Russian-speaking population in the Baltics can be stirred up to making life difficult. There are existing, fully formed political parties already representing many of them. Russia also controls the central heating in the homes of the Baltic people. It can set the price people pay for their heating bills each month, and if it chooses, simply turn the heating off. I gotta check this. Russia Baltic energy. Heating, central heating. Gotta look at this.
Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia have connected to Europe's energy system a day after turning off all supplies from Russia. The presidents of the 3 Baltic states described it as an historic day, declaring that Russia would never again be able to use energy as a weapon against us. The European Commission chief Ursula von der Leyen said breaking the final ties with Russia meant freedom from threats and blackmail. Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia have...
This book was written in 2015, so I'm catching up with history. Baltic energy, Europe, heating. This is bound to piss off Putin. Kind of like rubbing in his face to say that, okay, you want the Russians? Here, European energy, here, take this. Take your Russian energy and we'll go back to Europe. Yeah. This is all linked to Ukraine. It's almost the final straw. Russia will continue to push its interest in the Baltic states. They are one of the weak links in its defense since the collapse of the USSR, another breach in the wall. They would prefer to see forming an arc form the Baltic Sea, south and southeast connecting to the Urals. This brings us to another gap in the wall and another region Moscow views as a potential buffer state, firmly in the Kremlin sight of Moldova. Where's Moldova? Here. Moldova presents a different problem for all sides. An attack on the country by Russia would necessitate crossing through Ukraine. Over the Dnieper River. Where's the Dnieper River? Dnieper River. Dnieper River. There's the river. Here, Dnieper River, all the way here. And then over another sovereign border into Moldova. It could be done at the cost of a significant loss of life and by using Odessa as a staging post. But there would be no deniability. Although it might not trigger war with NATO, Moldova is not a member. It would provoke sanctions against Moscow at the level hitherto unseen, and confirm what this writer believes to already be the case, that the cooling relationship between Russia and the West is already the new Cold War. Why would the Russians want Moldova? Because as the Carpathian Mountains curve around the southwest to become Transylvania Alps, that's so cool. Hang on. Transylvania, okay. I will suck your blood, okay, Transylvania Alps. Transylvanian Alps. Hang on, let me see where the Transylvanian Alps are. Transylvanian Alps. It's in the middle, slap bang in the middle of... Where is it? Why is it? What's that country called? Romania, that's it. Well, of course I know it's in Romania. I've watched enough Marvel. To the southeast is a plain leading down to the Black Sea. That plain can also be thought of as flat corridor into Russia. How flat is it? Ankara. Here we go. What am I doing that for? Bulgaria. How flat is it? I just want to see how flat it is. Here. It's not that flat. Okay. Look at that. Transylvania. Yeah, it's all here. Okay, well, I'll say it's flat. This bit. Okay. The plain can also be thought of as flat corridor into Russia, and as the Russians would prefer to control the North European plain at its narrow point in Poland, so they would like to control the plain by the Black Sea, also known as Moldova, in a region formerly known as Bessarabia. Moldova. Why aren't this in English? I mean, why area American English? Everything's American English. Okay. Moldova. There's all these. Okay. All right. A number of countries that were once members of the Soviet Union aspired to closer ties with Europe, but with certain regions such as Transnistria in Moldova. Where's Transnistria? Tarassopol. It's somewhere here. Okay. Remaining heavily pro-Russian, there is potential for future conflict. After the Crimea War fought between Russia and Western European allies to protect Ottoman Turkey from Russia, the 1856 Treaty of Paris returned parts of Bessarabia to Moldova, thus cutting Russia off from the river Danube. River Danube. Where's the river Danube? River Danube. Go here. Let's go here. Let's open this up and let's boogie. Okay. There we go. River Danube. Okay, goes all the way up. Lower Danube here. And it goes into Moldova here. Okay. It took Russia almost a century to regain access of it, but with the collapse of the USSR, once more Russia had to retreat eastward. However, in effect, the Russians do already control parts of Moldova, a region called Transnistria. Where's Transnistria? Okay, there's Transnistria on the border, nearly on the border with Ukraine. Part of Moldova east of the Dniester River, which borders Ukraine. There we go, Dniester River. Is that Dniester River? There's a river here anyway. Stalin, in his wisdom, settled large numbers of Russians there, just as he had in Crimea after deporting much of the Tatar population. Modern Transnistria, does it still exist? Administratorial unit of the left bank. Does it say Transnistria here? It doesn't. Okay, but it's here. Is now at least 50% Russian or Ukrainian speaking, and that part of the population is pro-Russian. When Moldova became independent in 1991, the Russian-speaking population rebelled and after a brief period of fighting declared a breakaway republic of Transnistria. It helped that Russia had soldiers stationed there and it retained a force of 2,000 troops to this day. A Russian military advance in Moldova is unlikely, but the Kremlin can and does use its economic muscle and the volatile situation in Transnistria to try to influence the Moldovan government not to join the EU or NATO. Moldova is reliant on Russia for its energy needs. Its crops go eastward and Russian imports of the excellent Moldovan wine tends to rise or fall according to the state of the relationship between the two countries. Moldovan wine. Let's have a look at that. Let's look at this Moldovan wine.
Let's go on a trip to Moldova's best wine cellars. Hidden under rolling hills and big vineyards, these underground mazes are full of stories. Stories told by many generations of winemakers, echoing in rooms filled with amazing wine. Today we'll explore the hidden treasures of Krikova, Milesti Nishi and Lunteia. Get ready to be amazed by how big, how old and how artistic Moldova's underground wine cellars are. Our trip starts in Krikova, a city underground all about making wine. Imagine streets that go on for miles, not made of roads, but lined with oak barrels. Every turn shows a new street, a new corner, all under a stone ceiling. It's an underground world made from the earth, showing how hard people worked a long time ago. Here, in the cool, quiet dark, some of Moldova's best wines get better with age. Krikova's bubbly wines, made the old way, are super famous.
I need to check this Moldovan wine, Top Gear. I don't know. There's something here. Or Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay. I've spelled Ramsay wrong. Nothing. I don't drink wine anyway. Moldovan wine here.
I'm an American with a Moldovan partner. During my first trip to Moldova, the border guard was very shocked, looked at me and asked, "Are you sure?" Are you sure? Are you coming to the right place? Why Moldova? This does happen sometimes, okay? Sometimes even like this is the negativity of the situation, yes? Even you, if people don't ask me, why? You want to come visit me? But why? We have nothing of value here. Which is false. Moldova has a lot of fun stuff. You know, crazy thing. I went to Mexico for a month and a half in December, and there were random banners throughout Mexico. Random banners that just said Moldovan wine. That's it. No call to action. There was no website. There was no QR code. Nothing. Just like, but they were like Moldovan wine. I'm an American.
Okay. I don't know what does that prove, but anyway, let's get back to the reading. Otherwise, I'll be here forever. I've been here forever already, but I'm learning. Okay, across the Black Sea from Moldova lies another wine-producing nation, Georgia. It is not high on Russia's list of places to control for two reasons. First, the Georgia-Russian War of 2008 left large parts of the country occupied by Russian troops, who now fully control the region of Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Secondly, it lies south of the Caucasus Mountains, and Russia also has troops stationed in neighboring Armenia. Okay, here we go. Moscow would prefer an extra layer to their buffer zone, but can live without taking the rest of Georgia. That situation could potentially change if Georgia looked close to becoming a NATO member. This is precisely why it has so far been rebuffed by the NATO governments, which are keen to avoid the inevitable conflict with Russia. A majority of the population in Georgia would like closer ties with the EU countries, but the shock of the 2008 war, when then President Mikhail Saakashvili naively thought the Americans might ride to his rescue after he provoked the Russians, has caused many to consider that hedging their bets may be safer. In 2013, they elected a government and President Georgy Margveslashvili far more conciliatory to Moscow. As in Ukraine, people instinctively know the truism everyone in their neighborhood recognize, that Washington is far away and Moscow is near. Yeah, I think this is the reality, is that they have hopes, but when it comes to pushing back against Russia, I think geography is a thing that ultimately decides. whether America will come to its aid.
We are always worried and concerned about Russia being unhappy, but we want to be realistic. We want to be realistic together with our allies in NATO, together with Russians. We have to see and look at the facts that neither the independent states that have suffered from Russia's aggression, nor the NATO states have ever created any kind of problem or confrontation with Russia. This is a fact. I mean, once more again, you can hear declarations that are trying to demonize any kind of activities, but there is not a single case where Ukraine or Georgia or NATO allies have created any kind of complications for Russian Federation.
But they don't see it that way. You know that. I mean, you know, for example, Mikhail Popov, Kremlin advisor, again says NATO is an external threat to Russia and NATO enlargement is a threat to Russia's security. And here you are, Georgia saying you want to be a member of NATO and Russia saying that. That puts you in a difficult position.
We are in a difficult position, but this is, we have to stick to the main truth that what I have already mentioned. Plus, the main goal here is to unite NATO members and make them understand, not only to make Kremlin understand, but to make NATO members understand that a very clear policy towards the countries of Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, including Georgia, is making a much more stable and safer world. And if we are not clear about the countries, independent countries around Russia and about their future destinies, does this make the world more secure? Does this make future of Europe more secure?
Well, as Alexander Stubb, Prime Minister of Finland, shares a long border with Russia, not a member of NATO, but could join in due course. Quoted in the press in July, says there are too many people who want to isolate Vladimir Putin. There are too many people who want to isolate the Kremlin. And I don't think that is the way forward. Is he right or is he wrong? You're trying to isolate Russia. You're saying, we don't know why we're upsetting them. They have no right to be upset.
This is not isolation. On the contrary, the message that we are trying to send to Moscow is that peaceful, prosperous, stable Georgia is an opportunity for Russia versus a country on their southern borders which has problematic areas, which has pockets of uncontrolled territories, where you have drugs, where you have trafficking, and those are issues that we try, and this is a rational message to Moscow, this is a rational message to our European partners, that a more stable Georgia, a more stable Ukraine is not a threat, but an opportunity to Moscow.
It's something I'm noticing. Well, they've turned the comments off, which was a bit annoying, but I'm also noticing a lot of the news reports that cover some of the content of this book. The downvotes, the ratios are pretty bad against the reports. So that's an interesting pattern I'm noticing. Okay, Russia's most powerful weapon now, leaving to one side nuclear missiles, are not the Russian army and air force, but gas and oil. Russia is second only to the USA as the world's biggest supplier of natural gas, and of course it uses its power to its advantage. The better your relations with Russia, the less you pay for energy. For example, Finland gets a better deal than the Baltic states. Well, the Baltic states are kind of like buggered off with Europe, haven't they? This policy has been used so aggressively, and Russia has such a hold over Europe's energy needs that moves are afoot to blunt its impact. Many countries in Europe are attempting to wean themselves off their dependency on Russian energy, not via alternative pipelines from less aggressive countries, but by building ports. On average, more than 25% of Europe's gas and oil comes from Russia, but often the closer a country is to Moscow, the greatest dependency. Well, that kind of like went up the snuff with the Baltic states. Hang on a sec. Russia energy to Europe. This in turn reduces that country's foreign policy options. Latvia, Slovakia, Finland and Estonia are 100% reliant on Russian gas. The Czech Republic, Bulgaria and Lithuania are 80% dependent, and Greece and Austria and Hungary 60% dependent. About half of Germany's gas consumption comes from Russia, which, along with extensive trade deals, is partially why German politicians tend to be slower to criticize the Kremlin for aggressive behavior than a country such as Britain, which not only has 30% dependency but also has its own gas producing industry, including reserves of up to 9 months' supply. Let me find something shorter. Won't do the whole video.
Vulnerable households, subsidies for struggling companies, and tax reductions in the final bill. So let's take a look at those prices. In Germany, heating oil prices leapt by almost 77% in September compared to last year. And prices for natural gas in Europe have skyrocketed over 420% in the last year. 420%. Russia, of course, is the main EU supplier of natural gas. And critics have long been warning that the EU could be too dependent on Russian gas, which also led to the controversy surrounding the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which has yet to go online. Russian President Vladimir Putin defended the pipeline, saying its approval would ease Europe's energy problems.
The German regulator must make an appropriate decision, but they have not yet made this decision. Of course, if we were able to increase supplies along this route, we can say with absolute certainty that the tension in the European energy market would significantly decrease. This would, of course, also affect the prices on the European gas market.
Cool, let's continue. There are several major pipeline routes running east to west out of Russia, some for oil and some for gas. It is the gas line which are the most important. In the north via the Baltic Sea, let's bring back the map, okay. Is the Nord Stream route. We saw that earlier. It goes from here all the way to Germany. Let me bring up a Nord Stream pipeline. Got it. Image. So it goes here. Come on. Come on! Hello. There's Nord Stream 2, which connects directly to Germany. Below that, cutting through Belarus, is the Yamal pipeline, which feeds Poland and Germany. I need to have a look at this Yamal pipeline. If this stop-start of the reading annoys some of you, apologies, but this is more for my education. Which feeds Poland and Germany. In the south is the Blue Stream, taking gas to Turkey via the Black Sea. So there's loads of pipelines. I can't see that one. I can't see it. Here we go. Until early 2015, there was a planned project called South Stream, which was due to use the same route but branch off to Hungary. South Stream pipeline. Austria, Serbia, Bulgaria and Italy. Let me have a look at this. So from here, Russia goes from Italy, Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary. Okay. South Stream was Russia's attempt to ensure that even during disputes with Ukraine, it would still have a major route to large markets in Western Europe and the Balkans. Several EU countries put pressure on their neighbours to reject the plan, and Bulgaria effectively pulled the plug on the project by saying the pipelines will not come across its territory. President Putin reacted by reaching out to Turkey with a new proposal, sometimes known as the Turk Stream. This is cheeky, the Turk Stream. Oh, now we'll look at the Turk Stream. Go back. Turk Stream. freaking hilarious. Russia, Turkey say, oh, we'll give you one pipeline. Yeah, take it all. Take it all. Russia's South Stream and Turk Stream project to circumvent Ukraine followed the price dispute between the two states in 2005 and 2010, which at various times cut the gas supply to 18 countries. European nations which stood to benefit from South Stream were markedly more restrained in their criticism of Russia during the Crimea crisis in 2014. It's like all these countries come with a bowl asking for some gruel, oil gruel, gas gruel from Russia. Enter the Americans, America, with a win-win strategy for the US and Europe, noting that Europe wants gas and not wanting to be seen to be weak in the face of Russia's foreign policy. And the Americans believe they have the answer. The massive boom in shale gas production in USA is not only enabling it to be self-sufficient in energy, but also to sell its surplus to one of the great energy consumers, Europe. Let's see shale gas. Let's see what this shale gas is about. I don't know what shale gas is, but how shale oil is extracted. This is where the fracking thing works, isn't it? I don't want anything too long.
Do you know why the United States became the world's largest oil producer? It's because of shale oil extraction.
Shale gas, sorry, shale gas.
The oil is trapped in extremely tiny fractures, thinner than a hair. After selecting a well location, a drilling rig is built, and a special drill bit is installed. The rig rotates and drills into the ground. Cement is then poured into the fractures, solidifying to form a robust concrete well bore. Once the well reaches the designated position, a perforating gun is deployed. The perforating gun contains shaped charge explosives, which detonate to create rows of small holes. Next, pressurized fluid is injected into the well. Under immense pressure, the dense shale layer develops numerous new fractures, forcing ceramic particles into these fractures for support. Through these newly formed fractures, the oil flows into the wellbore and is continuously pumped to the surface. Do you know why the United States became the world's largest oil producer?
Let me have a look at another one.
So shale gas could not be extracted for more than 100 years since its discovery, until the emergence of fracking technology to completely change the situation. First, a super drill bit is prepared to drill a vertically oriented borehole in the ground and then horizontally drilled over when it reaches the designated location. Now a large amount of fracking fluid is injected into the borehole, creating a huge amount of pressure that forces the shale rock to crack. The cracks in turn expand along the looking rock layer, creating a larger surface area. Because of the proppant added to the fracking fluid, the cracks remain open after the pressure is released. Sometimes radioactive tracers are added to track the progress of the fractures. Once a fracture is formed, the gas in the shale rock escapes into the fracture and is next released with pressure into the well bore. Once the shale gas is extracted by ground crews, it can be stored in high pressure in it. So shale gas
basically. To do this, the gas needs to be liquefied and shipped across the Atlantic. This in turn requires liquefied natural gas, LNG terminals and ports to be built along the European coastlines to receive the cargo and turn it back into gas. Washington is already approving licenses for export facilities, and Europe is beginning a long-term project to build more LNG terminals. Liquefied natural gas. I need to check this out again. What's this? I don't want that one. Poland and Lithuania are constructing LNG terminals. Other countries such as the Czech Republic want to build pipelines connected to those terminals, knowing they could then benefit not just from American liquefied gas, but also supplies from North Africa and the Middle East. The Kremlin would no longer be able to turn the tap off. Let me have a look at that.
Liquefying. Hi, my name is Rena Fing. I started my journey with Shell as an engineer in training, and now I'm seconded to LNG Canada as a process engineer. LNG Canada is the largest single private sector investment in Canadian history. It is located in Kitimat at the head of the Douglas Channel, which is ideal because it is
I don't want to know all that stuff.
natural gas from 5 joint venture partners, including Shell Canada, enters processing units, where impurities such as carbon dioxide, water, and sulfur components are separated out. It's important that these impurities are taken out because during the liquefaction process, they can cause problems such as freezing and corrosion. The gas is chilled to approximately negative 162 degrees Celsius. That's nearly 5 times colder than the average winter in the Arctic. This condenses it into a liquid, shrinking the volume about 600 times. This is like taking it from the size of a beach ball to the size of a ping pong ball. LNG is colorless, odorless, non-toxic, and non-corrosive, and in its liquid state is non-flammable, making it safe to store and transport. After it's liquefied, the LNG is stored in insulated tanks to keep it cold until it's ready to be loaded onto LNG carriers and shipped around the world.
So basically, freeze it. Okay. The Russians, seeing the long-term danger, point out that piped gas is cheaper than LNG, and President Putin, with a "What did I ever do wrong? What did I do wrong?" on his face, says that Europe already has a reliable and cheaper source of gas coming from his country. LNG is unlikely to completely replace Russian gas, but it will strengthen what is a weak European hand in both price negotiation and foreign policy. To prepare for a potential reduction in revenue, Russia is planning pipelines heading southeast and hopes to increase sales in China. Yeah, it's kind of like, okay, you don't want it, we'll go somewhere else. Let me just ask ChatGPT, what's cheaper, LNG or natural gas? Directly from the source to buy a typical cost, usually cheaper per unit of energy. Pipelines already exist because you avoid liquefaction and transport costs. Stable supply, low price. Limited pipeline routes cannot easily be reached distance. Definition: natural gas cooled. Okay, we saw that. Liquefaction. Pros: can be shipped anywhere in the world. More flexible market access. Expensive than pipeline gas if you have local pipelines. Okay. European pipeline, $5 to $8. LNG, $8 to $12. Okay. This is an economic battle based on geography and one of the modern examples where technology is being utilized in an attempt to beat the geographic restraints of earlier eras. Hang on, what's that? I should use this one instead. But anyway, let me go bring this back up. Where's the other one? Why did I minimize that one? Okay, let's go back here. Warsaw Pat, delete that. I don't need this. Don't need that. Don't need that. Don't need that. Okay, let's go back here. A lot was made of the economic pain Russia suffered in 2014 when the price of oil fell below $50 a barrel, and lower still in 2015. Moscow's 2016 budget and predicted spending for 2017 was based on prices of $50. And even though Russia began pumping record levels of oil, it knows it cannot balance the books. Russia loses about $2 billion in revenue for each dollar drop in the oil price, and the Russian economy duly took the hit, bringing great hardship to many ordinary people. But predictions of the collapse of the state were wide off the mark. Anyway, Russia will struggle to find its huge increase in military spending. But despite the difficulties it faced, the World Bank predicts that in the second half of this decade, the economy will grow slightly. If the new discoveries of vast amounts of oil in the Arctic Kara Sea can be brought to shore, that growth will be healthy. I need to see the Arctic's oil. Let's see the oil there. Why did I say oil? It should be oil. Or did I miss out?
The Arctic Ocean. It nurtures seals, whales, walruses, polar bears, and millions of seabirds, just to name a few. This wildlife lets humans thrive here too. Indigenous peoples have relied on the Arctic Ocean for millennia. Today, Arctic habitats are threatened by a warming
Bullshit.
and melting sea ice. Meanwhile,
Bullshit.
oil companies want to drill for oil and gas deep beneath the seabed. It's a dreadful idea. Here's why.
It's a dreadful idea for you because you don't have access to it. This is all Russian access. They're trying to kind of demonize Russia, telling them you shouldn't be drilling for oil because we don't have access to it. Bullshit, man.
You've seen oil spills in the news. In 2010, the deadly Deepwater Horizon disaster
Okay, all right. These oil spills, they happen, but it's just as risky within the Middle East. What a Middle Eastern life doesn't count as much as animals and people based in the Arctic. There's more life down there. Jeez.
Barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, fouling hundreds of miles of coastline, killing marine and coastal life, and making people sick. Imagine a spill like that in a dark, remote place, 1,000 miles from any port, with ice and brutal weather making cleanup essentially impossible. Offshore drilling doesn't just threaten life in the...
It doesn't threaten. Let me leave a comment. Help the Arctic, save the Arctic, save the Arctic. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna skip the sob story. Yeah, we have to be considerate about the Arctic, but it's a lot more complicated than simple good guy, bad guy here. Okay. If the new discoveries of vast amounts of oil in the Arctic Kara Sea can be brought to shore, that growth will be healthier. Away from the heartland, Russia does have a global political reach and uses its influence, notably in Latin America, where it buddies up with whichever South American country has the least friendly relationship with the United States. For example, Venezuela, it tries to check American moves in the Middle East, or at least ensure it has a say in matters. It is spending massively on the Arctic military force and is consistently takes an interest in Greenland to maintain its territorial claims. Since the fall of communism, it has focused less on Africa but maintains what influence it can there, albeit in a losing battle with China. Where's Venezuela? Okay, why do I go there? I should go to the other countries, but then I'll be here forever. I'm already here forever. Competitors they may be, but the two giants also cooperate on various levels. Moscow, knowing that the Europeans have a long-term ambition to wean themselves off dependency on Russian oil, is looking to China as an alternative customer. China has the upper hand in what it is a buyer's market, but the lines of communications are cordial and well used. From 2018, Russia will supply China with 38 billion cubic meters of gas a year in a $400 billion 30-year deal. The days when Russia was considered a military threat to China have passed. Let me look at this. Russia supplies China oil, gas. This is a long time ago.
Provide a significant amount of China's daily needs, about 4%.
Russia will deliver about 300,000 barrels of crude a day. In return, China will finance the pipeline Russia will build from its eastern Siberian oil fields to the Chinese border. Energy analysts say the deal is another indication of Russia's eagerness to shift some of its energy exports from its main market, Europe. Evgeny Volk heads the Moscow office of the Heritage Foundation.
То, что сейчас происходит с Китаем, это what is happening right now with China is logical development of reorientation of Russian politics and economy towards the east, which has been happening for the past 5-6 years.
Yeah, it's been going on for some time. So let me see if there's a short. Shorts.
It is mutually beneficial project. This is one of the largest energy projects in the world. Be calculated using essentially the same formula as for deliveries to Europe. It is absolutely market-based. As for prices, they are a market in nature and are calculated using virtually the same formula as they were calculated when supplied to Europe. The formula is the same, but in Europe, these prices are the same. In Asia, they are different. Everyone is well aware that this is not an easy process, but everyone is striving to achieve a result that both contracting parties are interested in. This result has been achieved during many years of joint work between Gazprom and its Chinese partners. I can only congratulate everyone once again. I would like to congratulate all those who have initiated and implemented this work and believe that it will be a great achievement to bring about a new revolution. It is a mutually beneficial project. This is one of the largest...
Cool. The days when Russia was considered a military threat to China have passed, and the ideas of Russian troops occupying Manchuria as they did in 1945 is inconceivable. Although they do keep a wary eye on each other in places, each would like to be the dominant power, such as Kazakhstan. However, they are not in competition for the ideological leadership of global communism, and this has freed each side to cooperate at a military level where their interests coincide. What seems like an odd example came in May 2015, when they conducted joint military live fire exercise in the Mediterranean. Hang on a sec. China, Russia, live fire. Hang on a sec. Okay, just guns and bombs and shit. Beijing pushed into a sea 9,000 miles from home was part of its attempt to extend its naval reach around the globe, while Moscow had designed on the gas fields found in the Mediterranean. It is courting Greece and wants to protect its small naval ports in the Syrian coast. In addition, both sides are quite happy to annoy the NATO powers in the region, including the American 6th Fleet based in Nepal. Okay, so they kind of got fed up with all this office politics even, and they say, all right, you do what you want, we're going with China. At home, Russia is facing many challenges, not least of which is demographic. The sharp decline in population growth may have been arrested, but it remains a problem. The average lifespan for a Russian man is below 65, ranking Russia in the bottom half of the world's 193 UN member states, and there are now only 144 million Russians, excluding Crimea. From the Grand Principality of Muscovy through Peter the Great, Stalin and now Putin, each Russian leader has been confronted by the same problems. It doesn't matter if the ideology of those in control is Tsarist, communist or crony capitalist. The ports still freeze, and the North European plain is still flat. Let me remind us, flat as Texas. Strip out the lines of nation states, and the map Ivan the Terrible confronted is the same one Vladimir Putin is faced with to this day. Okay. So I learned quite a bit about this. And to be quite honest, when I read it the first time, it was intriguing, but it was always a case I was flicking through pages and then I got fed up flicking through pages of the map. But this is a lot more active learning. The whole point of these exercises, of this reading, is active reading, active learning, referring to written sources, referring to video sources, referring to images as well. And I like this, and I probably will continue with it. It comes at the expense of the gaming streams that I'm doing on my other channel, but I'll probably try and share one. Maybe I'll do this in the morning before I work, and then the gaming to relax. But there's so many hours in the day, isn't it? And we'll try our best. Anyway, let me just end the stream here. If you like this sort of video, or if you've got any comments about stuff that we covered here today, if you want to do clips, then by all means do so. You've got my blessing for that. But leave any comments if you have any thoughts about what we covered in this stream, and hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I want to do more of this, actually. If anything else, then made any mistakes, any mess ups, any screw ups with the pronunciation, I apologize for that. Tomorrow or the day after, we'll probably be looking into China. Okay. All right, then. Thanks very much for watching, and you take care, and I'll chat to you guys soon. Peace.